These are our men. The Parker Watch Company and its dealers throughout America dedicate this program to the United States Treasury Department for the sale of war bonds. With Ralph Edwards as our special guest today, we proudly present the eighth in this new series of dramatic programs, These Are Our Men. In the fight for total victory, these are our men. Vandergrift, Eisenhower, Nimitz, Marshall, Arnold, Wainwright, Halsey, Patton, Bradley. Today, it's the story of General of the Army, Douglas MacArthur. In a moment, we'll bring you General MacArthur's authentic life story. First, though, a reminder from me to send immediately for your copy of the book portfolio entitled These Are Our Men. And a word of greeting from our special guest, radio prankster par excellence and war bond salesman deluxe, the one and only Ralph Edwards.
Thank you. Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When it comes to war bonds, the truth is that if we don't buy all we can afford, we've got to be ready to pay the consequences. And that's not kidding, as any GI who's been up against our enemies can tell you. Now, think it over, and I'll be back later to swap conclusions with you. Right now, here it is, the story of a great American soldier, 5-star General of the Army, Douglas MacArthur.
A night in March 1942, the South Dock on the island of Corregidor. There is a man, a woman, and a child. A Navy lieutenant steps forward and salutes.
We're ready, sir, whenever you are.
Thank you, Lieutenant Buckley. Jean, you better get aboard.
All right, dear. Come along, Arthur.
How does it look, Lieutenant?
We're going to run into some rough seas, sir. It won't be a smooth ride, but we'll make it.
I know you'll get us through.
I'm a little concerned about your son. He's running a fever, isn't he, sir?
Yes, but don't worry, Lieutenant. He's going to be all right.
Then, sir, may I suggest that we get started as soon as possible?
I'll be along in just a moment, Lieutenant. I want to work with General Wainwright.
Very well, sir.
The tall, handsome man, lines of anxiety etched deep in his face, looks up the slopes of the fortress island. Once beautiful lawns that ran down to the sea are now torn and scarred by Jap bombs. In the distance, there are fires still burning from the last raid. There is an indescribable look of sorrow on the face of this man who stands taking a last look at Corregidor. He doesn't want to go. Twice before, he had refused to go, but at last he has bowed to a chief. He is going to Australia to take over supreme command. He is going to Australia if they can get through. He stands there, thinking of the wounded and the dying and the half-starved men in the tunnels and caverns of the rock fortress. And at last he turns and clasps the hand of an officer.
It's hard to say goodbye, Skinny.
It's better this way, Mac. You can help us more from Australia.
I wish you were going with me, Skinny, but I've got to leave you here.
I understand, Mac.
I want you to remember just one thing. I'm coming back.
I know.
Tell the men that. Tell them it's no empty promise. I swear to you, I'm coming back. I'm coming back if I have to come all alone.
Goodbye, Mac. God be with you.
Goodbye, Skinny.
They shake hands, these two lifelong friends, General Jonathan Wainwright, nicknamed Skinny, and General Douglas MacArthur. Then MacArthur walks quickly to the waiting PT boat.
All right, Lieutenant.
Very good, sir. Cast off.
Motors muffled, the PT boat slips out to sea to run the gauntlet of Jap warships. And back on the shore, General Wainwright watches the tiny craft disappear into the darkness, the words still echoing.
I'll be back. Tell them that. I'll be back.
This is the story of the man who came back from retirement to become one of our greatest leaders, who came back to the Philippines as he had sworn to do, who will not rest until he has come back to free his friend, Jonathan Wainwright, wherever he may be. For scores of years, the people of the Philippines have had reason to place their faith in the name of MacArthur, ever since the days when General Arthur MacArthur, the father of Douglas, was military governor of the Philippines.
Gentlemen, if you please. General MacArthur, sir, this is the committee you wish to see.
Gentlemen, how do you do?
Good morning, General.
Gentlemen, I've gone over your list of grievances. I've given them careful study.
Every one is the truth.
I am prepared to believe that. And I want to give you this assurance. From this moment forward, every Filipino will get equal consideration before the law with American citizens.
General MacArthur, surely you don't mean that a Filipino may bring a charge against an American?
I mean exactly that. And what's more, where there is evidence to support the charge, the American will be tried, and if guilty, he'll be punished.
It cannot be.
Why can't it be?
Sir, it is just that it seems too good to be true.
But it wasn't too good to be true. Filipinos got justice from General Arthur MacArthur. Americans, soldiers, and civilians alike might be brought to trial on a charge by a Filipino. The writ of habeas corpus, one of the cornerstones of the American Bill of Rights, was extended to all Filipinos. They were incredulous at first, but finally they believed.
This General MacArthur, when he says something, he means it. It is most unusual.
Not for a MacArthur. General Arthur MacArthur kept every pledge he made. And that is why Filipinos believed his son when he promised.
I'll be back. Tell them that. I'll be back.
Douglas MacArthur was born into the Army. He has had no other profession, just as his father before him. And his career has been marked by brilliance from the very beginning. From the day in 1903, when the results of the final examinations were posted at West Point.
Hey, Mac, wait a minute.
Hello, Skinny. What's the matter? You look all excited.
You're the guy that ought to be excited. Mac, I just saw the final class standing.
You did? Well, how'd I make you out? Did I make the upper half?
Upper half. Listen, Mac, you made the top. You're the first in your class.
First?
Good Lord. Why, fella, you've got stars sprouting out of those shoulders right now.
I'll settle for an eagle.
Wonder where we'll end up, Mac. Be fine if we could be together later on. We get along.
Yes, we do. Well, you never can tell about the Army, Skinny. We're pretty sure to meet up now and then.
I guess so. Wonder where it will be.
Fellow cadets at West Point, Jonathan Wainwright and Douglas MacArthur were fated to be the principal actors 40 years later in the stark drama of Corregidor. MacArthur's early assignments after graduating from West Point were deeply significant in the light of what has happened since. The first assignment was to the Philippines.
Come in.
Lieutenant MacArthur reporting, sir.
My new aide, eh?
Yes, sir.
I understand you led your class at West Point.
Yes, sir.
I suppose you know all the answers.
No, sir.
Well, do you consider yourself a great football player?
Just fair, sir.
You weren't too bad from what I read in the papers. Let me have a look at you. Good tailor you've got.
Yes, sir.
Well, Lieutenant, I guess you'll do. Son, how are you?
Fine, Dad. It's going to be great being with you.
Well, maybe I can teach you a few things, even if you did lead your class. Better than I could do.
I've got a lot to learn, Dad.
You're going to get a chance to learn it. We're going to act as observers with the Japanese Army.
I can't say I relish the company, sir.
That sneak attack they made on the Russian Navy at Port Arthur was pretty low.
War is often pretty low, son. It'll be our job to learn all we can about the Japs. I've got a hunch we may need the information someday.
His father's rank had not influenced the selection of Douglas MacArthur as observer in the Russo-Jap War. President Theodore Roosevelt had merely asked the War Department to recommend the two men best qualified. And the answer had come back to the White House. They both happened to be named MacArthur. Our entry into the First World War found Douglas MacArthur in Washington, risen to the rank of major after years of routine peacetime service. And one day, Secretary of War Newton D. Baker sounded him out on an idea.
Here's what I'd like to do, Major. I'd like to organize a division from the National Guard units of the 48 states. A division that would include men from all over the country. How does it strike you?
It's an interesting idea, Mr. Secretary. I think I like it.
You do?
Yes.
Then you're the first Army man who has liked it. Everyone else has been rather cool to it.
Why, no. I think it's a great idea. I'd like to serve with an outfit like that myself.
Now, that might be arranged.
You know, it grows on you, Mr. Secretary. Why, such a division would stretch across the country like a rainbow.
A rainbow. A rainbow division.
Yes, MacArthur had named it. The famous Rainbow Division that reached France in the fall of 1917 with Colonel Douglas MacArthur as Chief of Staff. Later, he was made Brigadier General and placed in command of the division. At 38, the youngest division commander in France. And, as he was always to be, one of the most colorful.
You gotta hand it to him.
Yeah? What do you mean?
MacArthur. He doesn't ask us to do anything he wouldn't do himself.
Well, he does too much, if you ask me. Got himself a whiff of gas yesterday.
I know, and he wouldn't even go back to the base hospital.
I don't think that guy knows what it is to be scared.
Doesn't seem to.
Funny guy. He'll tear a hide off any soldier he catches without a helmet, but he won't wear one himself.
Guess he figures they don't go so good with his uniform, huh?
Yeah.
Always in the front lines with his men, Douglas MacArthur led the Rainbow Division through all its brilliant offensives. And only the armistice stopped his men in a smashing attack that had driven the Germans back 19 kilometers in 2 days. He came out of the war as America's youngest division commander, a brigadier general at 38. A year after the war, he became superintendent of West Point, the youngest in the Academy's history, undertaking one of the Army's biggest peacetime jobs.
General MacArthur, this is no easy assignment. It almost amounts to saving West Point.
I understand, sir.
As you know, we've lost almost 9,000 officers, killed or wounded in the war. We've got to build a new generation of leaders against the next time.
It's a great responsibility, sir. I'll do my best.
I know you will, General. Good luck.
It was to be one of the most significant achievements in a brilliant record. Under MacArthur, West Point was revitalized. He adapted its military courses to the lessons learned from World War I. He added new courses, brought others up to date, rounded out a program of modern training that produced the men who are leading American forces around the world today. Youngest division commander at 38. Youngest superintendent of West Point at 39. Youngest major general at 43. Youngest chief of staff at 50. From the day he graduated from the military academy as top man of his class, Douglas MacArthur has gone on from one success to another in the service of his country. And yet, the chapters that history will note above all others still remain to be written on the morning of December 8, 1941. He had asked for retirement from the regular army so that he might devote himself to building a Philippine army and a defense of the Philippines that might have stopped the Japs if he had had time to complete them. He was asleep now. It was 4:30 a.m. Manila time. He reached for the phone at his bedside.
Hello. Yes? I'll be there at once.
Long before, 35 years before, he had said,
It will be impossible to keep the sea unless we meet quickly the desperate attack which Japan is now organizing against us.
And only a few years before, he had said,
The purpose of our Philippine plan is to assure an active defense for every foot of shoreline. This defense will be completed by 1946.
but the Japs struck 4 years too soon.
I beg pardon, sir. The flag outside your headquarters.
Yes, Captain. What about it?
It makes a target for the bombers, sir. Our observers suggest...
Take all other necessary precautions, Captain. The flag stays where it is.
The flag did stay where it was, and to that flag rallied the Filipinos, men, women, even children. They were ready to fight and die for the American flag, which stood for promises Americans like MacArthur had kept. He knew what lay ahead, a delaying action, then to fall back to Bataan and Corregidor. All eyes were on this man now, as here at home a nation reeled under the worst defeat in its history. What would MacArthur be able to do? May we invent a scene? We don't know just what words were spoken, but as the bombs fell on Manila, something like this must have occurred.
Jean,
Yes, dear.
we're in for a bad time.
I know.
We can't hold Manila.
Oh,
We've got to fall back, eventually to Corregidor.
yes.
Well, there's still time for you and Arthur to get away. I'm going to arrange it now.
No, Douglas.
But I can't let you stay here.
We're going to stay. We're going to stay on as long as you do.
But, Jean, we may never get away.
If that's the way it's going to be, all right.
I wish you'd go. But I'm glad you're going to stay.
No, those weren't the words spoken. But some words like them certainly were, as Jean MacArthur and little Arthur MacArthur followed husband and father through the bitter days that followed, to the very hell of Corregidor.
Mac, I wish you'd move out of that cottage and get down in the tunnel. You're just asking for one of those Jap bombs.
No nonsense, Skinny. There's not a Jap bomb made that has my name on it.
Will you at least take cover then? We can't afford to lose you.
You won't lose me until my job is done.
Will you at least wear a helmet then?
Skinny, you know I never wear a helmet.
All right, Mac. I ought to know better than to try to argue with you.
He stands there, dapper as usual, his cap tilted slightly, leaning on a walking stick. Is this a man who does not know the meaning of fear? Or is this simply a man with a great faith? Look at this man well, for he is one of the great figures of American military history. He's in his 60s now, but you'd guess that he was 15 years younger. He has been estimated variously. Some call him vain, melodramatic. Others have professed to be amused by the high literary quality of his communiques. One war correspondent called him an actor, a Barrymore in uniform. Another called him the greatest general since Washington. A third called him a poseur. A fourth said he was the most courageous man he had ever seen. Yes, people talk about MacArthur, because he's a man you just naturally talk about. But out of all the opinions that have been spoken or written about him, all agree on this. Douglas MacArthur has one interest above all others: the service of his country, the service to which he has devoted his entire life.
We're running short on food, Mac.
Cut the rations in half.
We can't keep up the half rations, Mac.
Cut them to a third.
All right. How long do you think we can hold out?
Until there's nothing left at all.
He walks into the main tunnel of Corregidor. The air is rank and stale. The wounded men lie row on row. And American girls, Army nurses, tired beyond exhaustion, hurry from one to another. There is not medicine enough, not doctors or nurses enough, not food enough. The tall, erect figure stops to talk to a wounded soldier.
How do you feel, son?
All right, sir, thanks. Sir, is there any news about reinforcements?
Not yet.
Do you think they'll ever come, sir?
Yes, they'll come. Eventually.
Eventually. That's a kind of a long time. Sir,
All right,
Yes?
John? All right, Bill?
it's none of my business, sir.
Go ahead, son. What did you want to tell me?
Sir, don't you think you ought to wear a helmet?
The days dragged on through the hell of Bataan and Corregidor, and American boys and American girls and the MacArthurs, little Arthur, Jean, and the General, all wrote an epic of courage unmatched since Valley Forge. In these dark days, with our fleet still crippled by the losses at Pearl Harbor, America could not spare Douglas MacArthur, and so the suggestion came from Washington that he try to escape to Australia. It was declined. The suggestion came again, and was again respectfully declined. The third time,
Well, Skinny, I don't seem to have any choice now.
No, that's an order, Mac. You've got to go. How will it be? Submarine?
No, I think I'll take my chances with Bulkley's PT boat.
It's going to be risky. Japs will be looking for you, Mac. They'd like nothing better than to nab you.
I suppose so.
They think it would do them a lot of good with the Filipinos. Maybe a submarine would be best.
No, Skinny. I think I'll take a chance on Bulkley.
and so, at dusk, on an evening in March 1942, the little group stood on the south dock on Corregidor.
You better get aboard, Jean.
All right, dear. Come along, Arthur.
The lines of anxiety etched deep in his face. The tall figure turns and looks up the bomb-torn slopes of Corregidor. Up where the dead and the wounded and the half-starving lie in the tunnels. In the distance, the fires of the last raid still flicker. And there is an indescribable look of sorrow on the face of Douglas MacArthur as he turns and clasps the hand of his friend from West Point days, General Jonathan Wainwright.
It's hard to say goodbye, Skinny.
You'll do us more good where you're going, Mike.
Well, I want you to remember one thing. I'm coming back. Tell them that up there. I'm coming back if I have to come back alone.
I know you will. Good luck. God be with you.
And he has come back. He is back in the Philippines now, at this hour. And he will not rest until he has gone all the way back to pay a debt. And in the paying of it, to free his friend, General Jonathan Wainwright, wherever he may be.
Another full ration of thanks to Stotts Cotsworth, our narrator, and to William Adams, who played the role of General MacArthur. A nice job, gentlemen. Now here he is again, our guest star and one of Uncle Sam's most successful Bond salesmen, Ralph Edwards.
Thanks again. Well, you've heard a great story about the kind of man we Americans like and admire. A man who keeps his word. When MacArthur left the Philippines back in 1942, he promised that he'd come back. He has come back with a vengeance. Because all of you listening in like stories, I wish I could add an anecdote of my own to the famous MacArthur legend, but I've never had the honor of meeting the general. I have, however, met two of the men who helped him keep his promise to return to the Philippines, and I'll remember him for many a long day. Yes, they helped MacArthur keep his promise, but don't get me wrong, they weren't members of the general staff or anything like that. As a matter of fact, one of them is a private first class, and the other's a sergeant. They're very good friends, and they were sent home together as convalescents from the South Pacific. I met them in an Army hospital where I'd gone to do a show, and as I've said, it'll be a long time before I forget them. And I'll tell you why. I'd been busy at the hospital most of the day, going from ward to ward, giving little shows for those who were still too weak to leave their beds. And finally, when it was pretty close to train time, I tried to make one more ward. As I entered the big room full of hospital cots, somebody yelled after me, "Hey, you better step on it, Ralph. We got to leave in 5 minutes to make the train." Well, with my gang, I went over and stood in front of the bed of the sergeant who had been in the South Pacific with MacArthur. I've started to get off a few gags. Not good, but I got them off. And the sergeant stopped me and he said, "Please, Mr. Edwards, I know you're in a hurry and you got to leave here right away. And so I wish that you go down and put on your act in front of the second bed from the end on the right there." Well, I thought that the sergeant was kidding me when I said to him, "What's the matter, fella? Don't you like our act?" And he said, "Oh, it isn't that, Mr. Edwards. It's just that pal of mine down there is feeling kind of blue. And his leg's broken in 3 places." Well, I did as the sergeant asked me and put on an act for the kid, a private, first class, and we left him with a grin on his face. It wasn't until I'd left the ward that I discovered how the sergeant had been wounded. Somebody told me then that this man, who had worried so much about his buddy's morale, had lost the sight of both of his eyes in the Solomons. He was totally blind. Well, this little story has no particular moral. It happens to be true, and it serves pretty well to show the kind of men who are fighting this war for us. All of them made a promise when they went into the service to do their best for us. And like MacArthur, they're keeping that promise every day. Now, when you and I buy a war bond, we're also making a promise that we'll help and continue to help them in their awful job. Anytime we trade in those bonds before maturity, we're breaking our promise. I think you get the point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ralph Edwards. These are Our Men, featuring today the dramatized story of General of the Army Douglas MacArthur with Ralph Edwards, star of Truth or Consequences, as our special guest, is presented each Saturday by the Parker Watch Company and its dealers throughout America, but not to sell watches. What we ask you to buy is bonds. That's it, war bonds. Thousands of radio listeners are today the proud owners of one of the most ingeniously designed kits ever offered on a radio program. It's the beautiful book portfolio, which the Parker Watch Company has had prepared for all who want it. It's a wonderful booklet in brilliant colors with the pictures and biographies of all the great American war leaders being dramatized on this series of programs. And in combination with it, a portfolio for the safekeeping of your war bonds, as well as a handy chart for recording the serial numbers of your bonds. How do you get your copy? Simply by sending us the mailing and wrapping cost of 10 cents. We'll do the rest. Address your request to the Parker Watch Company, Post Office Box 14, New York 19, New York. Write today. Enclose 10 cents in coin only and mail to the Parker Watch Company, Post Office Box 14, New York 19, New York, for your copy of our combination book portfolio entitled These Are Our Men. Next week, These Are Our Men will bring you the story of another one of our great leaders and another famous guest star. So be sure to tune in, same time, same station. The music for today's program was composed and conducted by Joseph Chernyavsky, and the entire production was under the direction of Anton M. Leader. Some of the material included in today's program is contained in Fraser Hunt's book, MacArthur and the War Against Japan, published by Charles Scribner's Sons. These Are Our Men is recorded by the Office of War Information for shortwave rebroadcast to foreign countries. Don't forget now, for your copy of our new combination book portfolio entitled These Are Our Men, send 10 cents in coin only to the Parker Watch Company, Post Office Box 14, New York 19, New York. This is Jack Costello speaking.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.